I need to speak with the manager, but they made him wait, and they lost 3 million. Michael Peterson clutched the yellowed envelope to his chest as the bank line inched forward. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a weariness that came from a long way back. He was 43, but seemed to carry the weight of a whole lifetime on those stooped shoulders. The teller in the yellow uniform looked at him when it was finally his turn. Her name was Karen, according to the nameplate on the counter. She was about 30, with hair pulled into a tight bun and an expression that mixed boredom with something close to disdain. "Yes. How can I help you?" she said, without looking up from her computer screen. "I need to speak with the manager. It's urgent." Michael's voice came out low, almost a whisper. Karen finally looked at him. Her eyes quickly scanned his worn brown leather jacket, the faded black shirt, the jeans with a small tear at the knee. She sighed. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's about an important transaction, 3 million. The teller let out a short, humorless laugh. "You need to schedule an appointment. The manager doesn't see anyone without one." "Please, it's really urgent. My father just—" Michael stopped, swallowing the words he couldn't say. "I need to sort this out today." "Everyone has their emergencies," Karen replied coldly. "You'll have to wait like everyone else. Sit over there and wait." She pointed to the benches in the corner of the branch, already turning her attention back to the screen. Michael stood still for a moment, as if he wanted to insist, but just nodded and walked to where she had pointed. The bank branch was modern, all in shades of grey and white, with artificial plants in the corners and an overly powerful air conditioner. Michael sat on one of the synthetic leather benches, placing the envelope on his lap. His hands were marked by calluses, his nails clean but uneven from someone who works with their hands. He watched the activity around him. The branch was full that Thursday morning. People came and went. Some greeted the staff by name. Others were immediately directed to the private rooms. A man in a grey suit arrived a few minutes later. He didn't even need to go through the line. A blonde employee, well dressed in a tailored suit that screamed elegance, came up to him with a broad smile. "Mr. Sullivan, what a pleasure to see you. Mr. Richard is waiting. Please follow me." Michael watched as the man was led directly to one of the rooms with frosted glass doors. Through them, you could see silhouettes but no details. He waited. 15 minutes passed, then 30. Karen called other customers, solved problems, processed transactions. Every now and then she cast a glance in his direction, as if checking if he was still there. An elderly lady with greying hair, elegantly dressed, arrived and was immediately greeted by another employee. 5 more minutes, and she was also in a private room. Michael gripped the envelope tighter. Inside it, documents that changed everything. Documents that his father, Robert Peterson, had kept for years, organized with that meticulous care that always characterized him. Robert had passed away just 3 days ago. A sudden heart attack while fixing the roof of the small mechanics shop he had run for 30 years. Michael could still see the scene when he closed his eyes. His father on the floor, hand on his chest, that frightened look. No. He shook his head, pushing the memory away. Another 20 minutes passed. The branch began to empty out a bit. Michael stood up and walked back to Karen's counter. "Excuse me, but it's been almost an hour. Do you think the manager could see me now?" Karen didn't even look up. "I already told you need to schedule an appointment." "But you told me to wait." "Wait to schedule an appointment," she replied with obviously forced patience. "The system is right here. I can schedule you for next week, Thursday at 10 in the morning. "Can't it be today, please? I came from Queens. I woke up at 5 in the morning to get here." Karen finally looked at him, and there was something cruel in her gaze. "Then you should have called ahead to schedule. It's not my fault you showed up unannounced." "I tried calling, but the phone was always busy." "Not my problem." Michael felt the blood rush to his face, but held back his anger. His father always said, "Son, when someone wants to provoke you, it's best to keep a cool head. A nervous person doesn't think straight." "All right," he said quietly. "But can I at least leave a message for the manager? To say that I was here?" Karen rolled her eyes in a way that 2 other attendants nearby noticed. One of them, a younger woman with brown hair, chuckled softly. "You can leave your name and number, but I can't guarantee they'll call back." Michael wrote down his details on a piece of paper she pushed toward him. Nearby, the elegant blonde employee walked by carrying a folder. She cast a quick glance at Michael, and for a second seemed to want to say something, but she just quickened her pace and disappeared down a side hallway. "Can I wait a little longer?" Michael insisted. "Maybe the manager has a moment between appointments." "Listen here." Karen leaned over the counter, lowering her voice, but keeping the sharp tone. "I don't know what you want, but this is a reputable agency. Mr. Richard doesn't see just anyone who shows up here. If you really had something important to discuss, you would have come prepared with an appointment, knowing how things work. My father had an account here for over 20 years. So what?" She straightened up again. "That doesn't give you the right to waste our time. Either schedule an appointment or you'll have to find another bank." Michael took a deep breath. He could feel the stares of other people on him. An older man in a suit waiting in the nearby line looked at him with a mix of curiosity and embarrassment. An elderly woman near the door averted her gaze when he looked at her. "All right," he said finally. "I'll come back another day." He was already turning away when he heard Karen comment to her colleague beside her, not bothering to lower her voice much. "These guys show up here thinking they can pull a fast one, as if we don't know how to spot when someone's trying to pull a scam." The colleague laughed. 3 million, can you imagine?" Michael stopped. Every muscle in his body urged him to turn back and say something, prove who he was, what he had in that envelope. But he knew that type of person. He'd known them since he was a child, from the days when he accompanied his father on deliveries, when people looked at them as if they were invisible just because they drove an old Volkswagen van and wore simple clothes. He left the agency without looking back. Outside, the bustle of Fifth Avenue was intense. Cars honked, people rushed back and forth, street vendors sold their products on the corners. Michael leaned against the wall of the building next to the agency, still holding the envelope. It was almost 11:30 in the morning. He hadn't eaten anything since 5 in the morning when he'd left home. His stomach growled, but the feeling of humiliation was stronger than the hunger. His phone rang. It was Emily, his sister. "So, did you manage to talk to them?" "They didn't want to see me." "What do you mean they didn't want to?" Her voice rose a pitch. "Michael, we need to sort this out quickly. There are bills to pay, the funeral was expensive, and I can't handle everything on my own." "I know, Em, I know." "Then go in there and make them see you." "It's not that simple." "Why not?" Michael looked at his own clothes, the jacket he had worn for years, bought on clearance, the pants his mother had patched twice before she passed away 5 years ago. "Because they look at me and just see a poor soul trying to pull a scam." Emily stayed silent for a moment. "But you have the documents, the will, the receipts, everything." "I know, but they didn't even give me a chance to show them." "Michael, you need to try again. Call a lawyer, go with someone who commands respect, I don't know." "Lawyers cost money, Em. Money we don't have right now." "But we will when you access Dad's account." He sighed. "Let me think. I'll figure out what to do." "Don't take too long, okay? The real estate agency is already calling about the overdue rent." When they hung up, Michael remained still there for a few more minutes. People passed by him without even noticing his presence. It was as if he were part of the scenery, just another face in the crowd. He thought about his father. Robert had always been discreet about his finances. He worked at the auto repair shop from sunup to sundown, wore simple clothes, drove an old car, never flaunted anything. Michael and Emily grew up in a modest house in Queens, attended public school, and started working early to help with expenses. It was only after everything happened, when they were organizing their father's papers, that they discovered the truth. Robert wasn't just a mechanic. He had investments, lots of investments, rental properties, stocks, funds, all meticulously recorded in notebooks and documents stored in a shoebox at the top of the closet. The fortune was there on paper, but completely inaccessible if Michael couldn't prove who he was and his right to that estate. And most of it was in that Fifth Avenue branch, where his father had kept an account for over 20 years. Michael decided to go back. He would wait as long as necessary. He had the right to be served. He had documents that proved everything. He wasn't going to give up just because a prejudiced teller decided he didn't deserve attention. When he entered the branch again, It was past noon. Karen was leaving for lunch, being replaced by another teller. Michael went straight to the benches in the corner and sat down. This time he wasn't going to ask. He would just wait until the manager showed up. An hour passed, then 2. The branch's activity slowed during lunch hour, then picked up again. Michael remained there, motionless, the envelope on his lap. The elegant blonde employee appeared again, this time accompanied by a client. As she passed Michael, she slowed her pace, looking at him carefully. There was something in her gaze, a kind of recognition, but she said nothing. At 3 in the afternoon, Karen returned from lunch. Seeing Michael still there, her face tightened. "Are you still here? I'm waiting for the manager. Didn't I already tell you that you need to schedule an appointment?" "And I did, for next week. But in the meantime, I'll wait here to see if he has a moment today." "This is disturbing. You're bothering the other customers." Michael looked around. No one seemed bothered. People didn't even notice his presence. "I'm just sitting here waiting. I'm calling security." "Go ahead. I'm a customer of this bank. My father had an account here for over 20 years, and I have the right to be here." His tone, for the first time, had a firmness that made Karen step back a bit. She exchanged a glance with her colleague beside her, who shrugged. "I'll inform the manager about your persistence." "Please do." Karen disappeared through one of the side doors. Michael took a deep breath. His hands were sweating, his heart beating fast. He wasn't one for confrontations, never had been. But something about that situation, the way he was being treated, awakened in him a determination he didn't know he had. 10 minutes later, Karen returned accompanied by a man in a dark suit. It was the security guard. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a serious expression but not exactly hostile. "Sir, I need to ask you to leave," said the security guard in a firm but polite voice. "Why? I'm not doing anything wrong." "The employee said you're insisting on a walk-in appointment and it's causing disruptions." "What disruptions? I'm just sitting here." "Even so, I must ask you to leave." Michael stood up slowly. He was shorter than the security guard, thinner, clearly at a disadvantage in any physical confrontation. But he didn't need a fight. He needed justice. "I'll leave," he said calmly. "But I want it on record. I'll be back tomorrow. And I'll bring lawyers with me." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The statement caused a momentary silence. Karen, who was watching from afar, let out a sarcastic laugh. "Lawyers? Of course. Absolutely." The security guard, embarrassed, just gestured toward the door. "Please, sir." Michael walked to the exit with his head held high. Before passing through the revolving door, he turned one last time and met the gaze of the elegant blonde employee. She was standing near one of the columns, watching the whole scene, and for the first time, he clearly saw the expression on her face. It wasn't disdain or indifference, it was concern. Outside, Michael leaned against the wall again. His legs were shaking. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving only fatigue and frustration. Lawyers. He had said he would return with lawyers. But where would he find lawyers? How would he pay for them? His phone rang again. Emily. "Michael, Mrs. Jenkins called. She said your dad owed 3 months of rent for the house." "What do you mean? Dad always paid everything on time." "Well, but she showed the receipts. The last 3 months weren't paid." Michael ran his hand over his face. Another complication. "How much is it?" 3,200. "I don't have that, Em." "Me neither. And she said if you don't pay by the end of the month, you'll have to vacate." "We can't vacate. All of Dad's things are there." "I know that. That's why you need to resolve this bank situation quickly." He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. It was all so complicated, so unfair. His dad had money, a lot of money, but it was all frozen, inaccessible, while debts piled up and they had no way to pay. "I'll figure it out," he said, more to himself than to his sister. When he hung up, he stood there for a few more minutes thinking. He needed help. He needed someone who understood laws, banks, how to make those people take him seriously. Then he remembered someone. Brandon Wilson, a school friend who had graduated in law. They hadn't spoken in years, But maybe, just maybe, he could help. Michael searched for the number in his old phone contacts and called. It rang several times before someone answered. Hello? Brandon? It's Michael. Michael Peterson. Remember me? There was a pause. Michael? Man, how long has it been? About 15 years. Around that. Look, I know this is out of the blue, but I need some help. What kind of help? Michael explained the situation. The loss of his father, the documents found, the bank account, how he was being treated. Brandon listened in silence. When Michael finished, he sighed. Man, that's complicated. Do you have all the right documents? Death certificate, will, proof that you're the heir. I have everything. Then it should be simple. The bank can't refuse to assist you, it's your legal right. But they are refusing. Because they're judging you by your appearance. It's discrimination, really. You could even sue them. I don't want to sue anyone, Brandon. I just want access to what's rightfully mine. I understand. Look, I can help you, but I need to be honest. My office charges a lot, and even if I gave you a discount, it would still be a few $1,000s just for the initial fees. Michael felt his heart tighten. I don't have that kind of money right now. Yeah, I figured, but I'll give you some advice. Go to the Legal Aid Society. They provide free services and can guide you on how to proceed. Or go straight to the Consumer Protection Bureau to file a formal complaint against the bank. Sometimes an official complaint is enough to make them change their attitude. You think so? It's worth a try. And if it doesn't work, call me again. We'll see what we can do. When he hung up, Michael at least had a path. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. He looked at the bank building. Inside, those people were going about their lives, serving well-dressed clients, making million-dollar transactions, completely unaware of how simple prejudice could destroy someone's life. But he would be back. And when he returned, it would be different. Michael spent the rest of the afternoon researching. He went to a nearby internet cafe and looked up information about heirs' rights, banking procedures, how to file formal complaints. He wrote everything down in an old notebook he had in his backpack. When he got home, it was past 7 in the evening. The house in Queens was small, 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen and bathroom. It was part of an old housing complex. The walls needed painting, the floor was worn, but it had been his home his entire life. Emily was in the kitchen preparing something for dinner. She was 3 years younger than Michael, 40 years old, and worked as a nursing assistant at a health clinic. She had the tired face of someone who works double shifts to make ends meet. "Did you get anywhere?" she asked when he came in. "Sort of. I spoke with Brandon, remember him? Mr. Johnson's son who became a lawyer. That's the one. He gave me some tips. I'm going to try to file a formal complaint tomorrow." Emily sighed, stirring the pot on the stove. "This is going to take time, Michael." "I know. And we don't have time. The bills are piling up." "Em, I'm doing what I can." She turned to him, and there were tears in her eyes. "I know, I'm sorry. It's all so unfair. Dad worked his whole life, saved money, got everything in order for us, and now we can't even access what's rightfully ours." Michael approached and hugged her. Emily started crying for real, sobbing against his shoulder. "We'll get through this," he said, though he wasn't sure. "Everything will be okay." That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He tossed and turned in bed, thinking about everything he needed to do, about all the complications that kept arising. And he thought about his father. Robert had been a good man, hard-working, honest, dedicated to his family. He never raised his voice to his children, never let them go without, even in the toughest times. And when Michael had decided not to go to college, preferring to work in the shop with his father, Robert didn't judge him. He just said, "Son, everyone knows what's best for themselves. The important thing is to be honest and work hard." And Michael had done that. He worked in the shop for years, fixing cars, helping his father, saving a little money when he could. He never got rich, but he had his dignity, his simple but honest life. Until everything changed. The next morning, Michael woke up determined. He took a shower, put on his best clothes. A pair of black dress pants and a white shirt he wore for special occasions. It wasn't a suit, but at least it was clean and ironed. He first went to a notary's office, got certified copies of all the documents. Death certificate, his and Emily's birth certificates, his father's will, bank account statements. He spent almost $100 on the authentications, money that hurt to take out of his pocket, but it was necessary. Then he went to the Legal Aid Society. The line was huge, people with all kinds of needs, all waiting for free assistance. Michael picked up his ticket and sat down to wait. 3 hours later, he was finally called. A young lawyer, about 30 years old, greeted him in a small, cramped room. "How can I help you, sir? What's the situation?" Michael explained everything. The lawyer listened carefully, taking notes. "Okay, I understand. Do you have all the documents?" "I do." She examined each paper carefully. "Everything is in order. You are the legitimate heir, the will is clear, there are no other people involved. The bank has no legal basis to refuse to assist. So what do I do?" "First, we'll send an extrajudicial notification. It's a formal document where we notify the bank that it is failing to fulfill its legal duties and give them a deadline to resolve the situation. If they don't respond, then we proceed with a lawsuit." "How long does that take?" "The notification, about 2 or 3 days to prepare and file. Then the bank has 10 days to respond. If it's not resolved, the lawsuit can take months." Michael felt his stomach churn. "Months?" "Unfortunately, yes. The judiciary is slow. But usually, when the bank receives a formal notification from a public agency, they take action to avoid bigger problems. It was something, at least." Michael thanked her, left copies of the documents, and walked out with a little more hope. When he got home, Emily was leaving for work. "So, they're going to send a notification to the bank. She said it'll take a few days." "Days we don't have, Michael." Mrs. Jenkins called again. She said if we don't pay by Monday, she'll start the eviction. "Monday? But didn't she give us until the end of the month?" "That's what I thought, but she said she changed her mind, that she can't wait any longer." Michael clenched his fists. It was one pressure after another, one problem on top of the other, without pause, without rest. "I'll try to talk to her, explain the situation." "Good luck." She didn't seem very willing to negotiate. Michael went to Mrs. Jenkins's house. She lived 2 streets away, a house bigger than theirs, well kept, with a garden in front. When he rang the bell, she took a while to answer. Finally, she appeared at the door with a stern expression. "Michael." "Mrs. Jenkins, I came to talk about the rent." "There's nothing to talk about. Either pay what you owe by Monday or move out. You know my father just passed away. I'm trying to sort everything out, but it takes time. That's not my problem. I have my bills too." "I know, and I will pay. I just need a little more time." "A little more time is not possible. It's already 3 months overdue. But Dad always paid on time before." "Before, yes, but now he's not here anymore, is he? And you're not paying." There was something cruel in the way she said that. Michael took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mrs. Jenkins, please, just 2 more weeks. I guarantee I'll have the money by then." She studied him for a long moment. Her eyes narrowed. "All right, 2 weeks, but not 1 day more. And I want the full amount with interest." "How much is the interest?" 10% per month. That's another $1,000. $1,000? But that's abusive. It's in the contract, Michael. If you don't want to pay, just move out." He wanted to argue, to reason with her, but he knew it would lead nowhere. Mrs. Jenkins was known in the neighborhood for being tough in business. "All right," he said finally. 2 weeks, with the interest." When he left, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. $4,200. Where would he get that money in 2 weeks? He thought about selling something, but he had nothing of value. His father's car was broken. The workshop only had old tools. The house had some furniture, but nothing of much value. Maybe he could get a loan. But from whom? He had no assets to use as collateral, no registered fixed income. He was lost in this whirlwind of thoughts when the phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello? Michael Peterson?" "Yes, who's speaking?" "My name is Samantha Miller. I'm a relationship manager at Pinnacle Bank. I'd like to speak with you about an account that belonged to your father." Michael stopped in the middle of the sidewalk. "Pinnacle Bank?" "That's right. I see in our system that you were at our Fifth Avenue branch yesterday and the day before trying to speak with the manager. And you are? I'm the relationship manager for special clients. And your father, Robert Peterson, was one of our oldest clients. It was her, the elegant blonde woman who had looked at him in the branch. I tried to get help, but they didn't even give me a chance to explain. I know, and I apologize for that. Karen, our teller, didn't know who you were. I only recognized you because I personally assisted your father whenever he came to the branch. So you know about... I know about everything. Your father entrusted me with the details of his estate planning. He wanted to make sure that when the time came, everything would be passed to you and your sister, without complications. Michael felt his legs weaken. He sat on a nearby wall. I tried to explain that, but no one would listen to me. I understand. Look, I can't talk much on the phone, but I'd like to schedule a meeting with you. Tomorrow morning at 9, would that work? Yes. Great. Come straight to my office. 3rd floor, room 305. My name is Samantha Miller. Just tell reception you have a meeting with me. Do I need to bring any documents? Bring everything you have. The more documentation, the better. When they hung up, Michael stood there for several long minutes. Finally, someone who was willing to listen to him. Someone who knew his father, who knew the truth. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to work out. That night, he organized all the documents in a folder. Certificates, receipts, copies of the will, his father's notes. Everything arranged in chronological order, the way Robert liked to do it. Emily arrived late from her shift, exhausted. Did something happen? Something happened, said Michael, unable to hold back a small smile. I think we're going to be able to sort this out. He told her about Samantha's call. Emily listened with wide eyes. Really? She called you? She did. She said she knew Dad, that she knew everything. Thank God. Emily leaned against the wall, bringing her hands to her face. I couldn't take the pressure anymore. Neither could I. The next morning, Michael woke up early, showered, put on the dress pants and white shirt again. This time, he also took the brown leather jacket his father had given him years ago. It was worn out, the leather faded with time, but it had been his father's, and somehow wearing that jacket made him feel like Robert was there with him. He arrived at the branch at 8:30. The same bustle, the same well-dressed people coming and going, but this time he didn't go to the service counter. He went straight to reception and said he had a meeting with Samantha Miller. The receptionist, a different woman from before, checked the system and smiled. 3rd floor, room 305, you can go up. Michael took the elevator up, his heart pounding. The 3rd floor was clearly for special clients. The carpet was thicker, the walls had elegant paintings, and there were genuine leather sofas in the hallways. He found room 305 and knocked on the door. Come in, said a woman's voice. Samantha was sitting behind a mahogany desk, wearing the same kind of elegant clothes she had worn when he saw her the previous days. She stood up as he entered, extending her hand. Michael, right? Nice to finally meet you officially. Please have a seat. He shook her hand and sat in one of the comfortable chairs in front of the desk. Samantha was around 45 years old, with well-kept blonde hair, subtle makeup, and an air of professionalism and efficiency. First, I want to apologize for what happened in the last few days, she began. The way you were treated is unacceptable. You are the son of one of our oldest and most respected clients, and should have been welcomed with full attention. I tried to explain, but I know. Karen judged by appearances and didn't give you the proper attention. That is already being handled internally. Michael nodded, not quite knowing what to say. Did you bring the documents? Yes, I did. He opened the folder and started taking out the papers. Samantha examined them one by one, carefully and attentively. Everything is here, perfect. Look, I'll be very direct with you, Michael. Your father was an extraordinary man. He started investing with us over 20 years ago when he was still a mechanic with a small shop. In the beginning, the amounts were modest, but he had impressive discipline. Every month he deposited a portion of what he earned. Never missed, never late. I didn't know that. Exactly. He didn't talk much about his finances, did he? He was discreet. But over the years, those modest investments grew. He made good choices, got lucky with some properties he bought at the right time, reinvested the profits, and before I knew it, he had a significant portfolio. Michael listened, fascinated. It was like discovering a side of his father he had never known. About 3 years ago, he came to me to do estate planning, Samantha continued. He said he was feeling the weight of age, that he wanted to leave everything organized for his children. Together, we made a detailed will, registered everything with a notary, separated the investments so the transition would be as smooth as possible. And how much? Michael hesitated. How much did he have? Samantha typed something on the computer and turned the screen toward him. At the last balance 3 weeks ago, his portfolio was valued at $3,247,000. Michael felt the air leave his lungs. He knew it was a lot of money, but seeing the number there, concrete, was different. This is divided between investments in funds, some CDs and shares in 3 commercial properties, all generating passive income. Your father lived off the shop's salary and let the investments grow. Why did he never tell us? Samantha smiled sadly. He told me once that he didn't want you to change, that he didn't want money to corrupt the simplicity and honesty he worked so hard to teach. He said when the time came, you would know what to do with it. But while he was alive, he wanted you to live on your own means to understand the value of work. Michael felt his eyes burn. It was so typical of his father, always thinking of his children, always wanting the best, but in his own way, with his philosophy. And now, what do I need to do to access this? Now it's simple. With the documents you brought, we'll start the probate process. Since everything was already registered and organized, it shouldn't take long. 2-3 months at most. Meanwhile, I can release a portion of the funds for immediate expenses. The will provided for that. How much can you release? Up to $50,000 to cover probate costs, funeral expenses, and outstanding bills. Michael almost fell out of his chair. $50,000. That was more than he earned in 2 years of work. Can I get that today? Not today, but I can process it by the end of the week, Monday or Tuesday at the latest. He felt such a strong wave of relief that he had to hold onto the arm of the chair. The bills, the rent, all the pressures that had been crushing him. Finally, a way out. There's one more thing, said Samantha. Your father left a letter for you and your sister. He asked me to deliver it personally when the time came. She opened a drawer and took out a white envelope with the name Michael and Emily written by hand in their father's neat script. Michael took the envelope with trembling hands. You can open it here if you'd like, offered Samantha, or take it home. I'll take it home to read with Emily. Of course. Look, I'll need some signatures today, just to start the procedures, and I'll give you my direct contact. If you need anything, any questions, call me. I'll personally oversee the whole process. They spent the next hour filling out forms, signing documents, organizing the next steps. When they finally left the room, Michael felt in a state of shock. On his way out, he passed through the service area. Karen was there at the same counter. When she saw him, her face paled. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but he just kept walking without looking back. Outside, he breathed in the air of Fifth Avenue. It was noon, the sun strong, the movement intense. But everything seemed different, as if a huge weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Michael took the subway back to Queens. The return trip always seemed faster, but this time he barely noticed time passing. He kept holding the envelope Samantha had given him, feeling its weight, imagining what his father had written. When he got home, Emily was already there. She had the day off. So, how did it go? Michael sat on the couch next to her and told her everything. Emily listened with eyes growing wider, her hand over her mouth. $3 million? She whispered when he finished. 3,200,000 to be exact. My God, Dad, all this time. That was his way. He was always discreet, always planned ahead. And we can get 50,000 now. By Tuesday. Emily started to cry, but it was from relief, from gratitude. She threw herself into her brother's arms, and they stayed like that for long minutes, just hugging, processing everything. "He left a letter," Michael said after a while, showing the envelope. Emily stared at it. "Shall we read it?" "Let's." Michael carefully opened the envelope. Inside there were 3 pages written by hand in their father's writing. He began to read aloud. "My dear children, Michael and Emily, if you're reading this, it means I'm already gone. I hope you haven't suffered too much that my passing was quick and painless. I was always afraid of being a burden to you, of getting sick and dependent. If God was good, He took me while I was still active and useful. I want you to know that every day with you was a gift. Since you were born, you were my reason to live, to work, to strive. Your mother, God rest her soul, would also be very proud of the people you've become. I know you'll be surprised by what you'll discover about my finances. I had my reasons for keeping it a secret. It wasn't for lack of trust in you, but because I wanted you to grow up with your feet on the ground, to understand the value of honest work, not to depend on inheritances or expectations of wealth. I worked hard all my life. I started at 12, helping my father on the farm. I came to New York at 16, alone, with nothing. I worked in factories, in construction, in whatever came along. When I opened the shop, it was with borrowed money and a lot of sweat. But I was always careful with money. I saved a little every month, even when times were tough. I invested in things I understood, real estate in the area that was growing, safe funds. I never risked too much, never speculated, and over time it grew. I could have used this money to have an easier life, a better car, a bigger house, but I didn't want to, because the money wasn't for me, it was for you, so that when I'm no longer here, you'd have security, you'd have choices, you'd have freedom. But listen carefully to what I'm going to say. Money is a tool, not a goal. It can make life easier, solve problems, provide comfort. But it doesn't bring happiness on its own. Happiness comes from meaningful work, from genuine relationships, from living with dignity and honesty. Don't let this money change who you are. Continue being the simple, hard-working, honest people you've always been. Use these resources wisely. Invest in education, in security, in things that make sense. And if you can, help those in need. Life has been generous with us. Be generous too. Michael, my son, you've always been like me. Quiet, hard-working, responsible. Take care of your sister, but don't forget to take care of yourself too. You deserve to be happy. Find someone to share your life with. Build your family. Live fully. Emily, my daughter, you have your mother's huge heart. Keep taking care of people. Keep making a difference in others' lives. But don't sacrifice yourself so much. You also deserve to rest, have fun, enjoy life. And both of you, together, take care of each other. Family is the most important thing there is. Don't let money or anything else separate you. Always be united, always be there for each other. I know I was a simple father. I didn't give you trips, expensive gifts, sophisticated experiences, but I gave you the best I had. My time, my example, my love. I hope that was enough. Live well, be happy, and every now and then, remember old Robert, who loved you more than anything in this world. With all my love, Dad. When Michael finished reading, both he and Emily were crying openly. It wasn't sadness, or at least not just sadness. It was gratitude, it was love. It was the feeling of having been deeply loved and cared for, even after that love was no longer physically present. They stayed there, hugging, for a long time. And when they finally separated, there was a peace they hadn't felt in days. In the following days, life began to take a different turn. On Tuesday, as promised, Samantha released the $50,000 into an account she helped open for Michael. The first thing he did was pay Mrs. Jenkins $4,200 with the abusive interest. She was surprised when he showed up with the cash, counting the bills on her living room table. "I thought you wouldn't be able to," she said, somewhat embarrassed. "I did. And I won't need more time, Mrs. Jenkins. When everything is settled, we're going to buy the house. Are you interested in selling?" "Sell the house?" She blinked, surprised. "Are you or aren't you?" "Well, Never thought about it, but if the offer is good, I'll make a fair offer. Not now, but in about 2 months. Think about it." And he left, leaving Mrs. Jenkins completely stunned. Then he went to his father's workshop. It had been closed for days, the sign swinging in the wind. He opened the door, smelled the familiar scent of oil and grease. Everything was as his father had left it. The tools organized on the wall, the old calendar, the little old radio in the corner. Emily arrived shortly after. They spent the afternoon cleaning, organizing, deciding what to do. "Are we going to sell?" she asked at one point. "I don't know. Part of me wants to keep it. It was Dad's place, you know. There's history here. But are you going to work here, continue as a mechanic?" Michael looked around. He had spent years there, learning the trade, fixing cars, talking with customers. It had been good, but it had also been limiting. "I don't know, Em. I need to think." "You don't have to decide now. We have time." And they really did. For the first time in a long while, they had time. They had choices. They had possibilities. Meanwhile, at the Fifth Avenue Bank branch, things weren't going so well. Richard Barnes, the manager, was sitting in his office breaking into a cold sweat. In front of him were 2 men in suits representing the regional board. "Let me see if I understand," said one of them, a man about 50 years old, bald, with thick-framed glasses. "One of our oldest clients, with a portfolio worth over $3 million, came here twice trying to be served. He was ignored, humiliated, and even removed from the premises by security." "I didn't know who he was," Richard tried to justify himself. "The teller didn't inform me correctly." "And you didn't find it strange that a man would insist so much, talk about $3 million, come back the next day? You didn't think to check?" There were many clients on those days, many demands. And now he's transferring everything to another institution. Not just his $3 million, but he also recommended it to the 3 children of the partners in the properties he had a stake in. In total, we're losing nearly $10 million in investments. $10 million, Richard." The manager swallowed hard. "I can try to reverse it, talk to him, offer special conditions." Too late. Samantha already tried. He was polite, thanked her, but was firm. He said the treatment he received showed the true character of this branch. And you know the worst part? He's right. The other director, younger, leaned forward on the table. "Here's what we're going to do, Richard. You're taking 2 weeks of vacation, effective immediately. Meanwhile, we'll conduct a full audit of this branch, customer service, procedures, organizational culture. If we find more problems, and I'm sure we will, you'll be transferred to a smaller branch, or worse. But no buts. You're dismissed." When Richard left the room, he was pale. He walked down the hallway toward his office and saw Karen at the service counter. She was different, quieter, avoiding looking around. He thought about saying something, about blaming her too. But why? The mistake was his. He was the manager, the one responsible. He should have checked. He should have paid attention. The following week, Karen was called to a meeting with Human Resources. She knew what was coming. She had seen the movement in the branch, the whispers, the looks. "Karen, you're being transferred," said the HR manager, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, "to the Jersey City branch. It's a smaller unit with less traffic." "Why? Because of that client?" "Because of the way you treated that client, yes. And it wasn't just him. We conducted an analysis of the past few months and found several complaints about your service. You've been discriminatory, impatient, disrespectful. But I've always been efficient. I meet my targets." Efficiency isn't just about numbers, Karen. It's also about respect, empathy, professionalism, things you've demonstrated you lack. The transfer is already decided. You start on Monday in Jersey City. Karen left there furious but also frightened. Jersey City was far. It was a small branch, without prestige. It was a clear punishment. She thought about complaining, about contesting it. But she knew she had no grounds. She really had treated that man poorly, and it hadn't been the first time she judged someone by their appearance. That night at home, she thought a lot. It was time to change, to really rethink how she saw people, or she would keep paying for it. Meanwhile, Michael and Emily were rediscovering their father through the papers he left behind. Besides the will and the bank documents, Robert had notebooks full of notes, records of every investment, every decision, every thought about the future. "Look at this," Emily showed a note dated 15 years earlier. "Bought the apartment in Astoria. It's small, but the neighborhood is growing. In 10 years it'll be worth double. I'll rent it out for now. The income will help pay for the next one." "He was a strategist," said Michael admiringly. "He planned everything years in advance. And always thinking of us. Look here. If anything happens to me, I hope Michael and Emily use this to have freedom. I don't want them to work for money. I want them to work for meaning." Michael felt a lump in his throat. His father had thought of everything, even the emotional aspect of leaving that inheritance. A month later, the probate process was moving along well. Samantha handled everything personally, keeping Michael informed at every stage. "We're almost there," she said in one of their meetings. "About 6 more weeks, and everything should be cleared. Samantha, can I ask you a question?" "Of course." "Why did you help? Why did you call me, show concern, go out of your way?" She smiled. "Your father was special. I served dozens of clients, but he was always different. Humble, polite, careful. He never demanded anything, was never arrogant, even though he had much more money than many who think they're important. He taught me that a person's true worth isn't in their bank account. When I saw you being treated that way, I remembered him and thought, I need to do what's right. Thank you. Really. No need to thank me. It was the least that should be done." During those weeks of waiting, Michael and Emily talked a lot about the future. Emily decided she wanted to go to college. She had always dreamed of becoming a registered nurse, not just an assistant. With the resources available, she could finally make that dream come true. "I'm going to apply for the entrance exam," she said, excited. "I've always wanted to study nursing at NYU, but I never had the means to pay for prep courses or dedicate myself to studying." "You'll make it," encouraged Michael, "and I'll support you in whatever you need." Michael, on the other hand, was uncertain. Part of him wanted to keep the shop, keep his father's legacy alive, but another part felt it was time to try something new. "You know what I've always wanted to do," he said to Emily one night. "Work with classic car restoration. Not just regular mechanics, but actual restoration, bringing old cars back to life. Why didn't you ever do it?" "I needed startup capital, specialized equipment, proper space, time to develop the projects. I never had the means. And now you do. And now I do." The idea began to take shape in his mind, a shop specializing in classic cars, work that combined his technical skill with something more artistic, more meaningful. 2 months after the first day Michael had tried to enter the bank, the probate was finalized. The inheritance was officially released. Michael and Emily went together to the branch, this time to complete the transfer of everything. Samantha greeted them with a smile. "Congratulations to both of you, it's all done. The funds are available in your accounts." "3,247,000, said Emily, still in disbelief. "Actually, a bit more. The investments earned during these 2 months, 3,312,000 now. They signed the last papers, made the final transfers. It was real, it was theirs." As they were leaving Samantha's office, Michael saw Karen in the hallway. She was carrying a box with her belongings, clearly moving out. She saw him too and stopped. For a long moment they just stared at each other. Then she lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for the way I treated you." Michael nodded. "I hope you learned something." "I did." She took a deep breath. "I learned that you should never judge a book by its cover, and that arrogance and prejudice only bring bad consequences. Good luck, Karen." She seemed surprised by his genuine wish. "Thank you. Good luck to you too." Outside, Michael and Emily stopped on the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, watching the movement around them. "And now?" asked Emily. "Now we live, the way my father wanted, with dignity, with purpose, helping anyone in need." In the following months, a lot changed. Michael bought Mrs. Jenkins's house. He made a fair offer and she happily accepted. Then he renovated the entire place, turning it into a comfortable home for him and Emily. He also found a warehouse in Soho, a large, well-lit space. He invested in top-of-the-line equipment and opened his specialized classic car restoration shop. The name, Robert Peterson Classic Restorations, reviving memories. The first project was his own father's car, a 1978 Chevrolet Caprice that had been sitting broken in the garage for years. Michael spent 3 months restoring every detail. When he finished, it was a work of art on wheels. Emily started college. She was accepted into the nursing program at NYU, fulfilling a long-held dream. She could finally dedicate herself fully to her studies, without having to work double shifts just to survive. They also set up a fund in their father's name. Every month, they set aside a portion of their resources to help people in situations similar to what they had been through, paying urgent bills, assisting with medical treatments, providing scholarships, small actions that made a big difference. 1 year after that first day at the bank branch, Michael was in his shop, working on a 1967 Beetle when the phone rang. Robert Peterson Classic Restorations. Michael Peterson? Yes, who's speaking? This is Car and Driver magazine. We're doing a story on specialized restoration shops, and your name was recommended. Can we schedule a visit? Of course, it would be a pleasure. When he hung up, Michael looked around. The warehouse was full of projects, cars in various stages of restoration, organized tools, a small but dedicated team of 3 mechanics he had hired. It was everything his father had dreamed of. Work with meaning, dignity, the ability to make a difference. His cell phone rang. It was Emily. "Cello, I finished my first exam. I think I did well." "That's great, Mari. Should we celebrate tonight? We can go to that restaurant we've always wanted to try." "Let's do it. I'll close up here at 6 and we'll go." That night, Michael and Emily dined at an elegant restaurant on Park Avenue. It wasn't about showing off, just the fulfillment of something they had always wanted but never could afford. "You know what's the craziest thing about all this?" Emily said at one point. "We have money now, but we don't have to work, yet we're working more than ever." "Because we're not working for the money," Michael replied. "We're working for something bigger. It's what Dad wanted." It's exactly what Dad wanted. Meanwhile, at a smaller branch in Jersey City, Karen was closing her workstation. She had been there for 4 months, and it had been a transformative experience. Without the prestige of the Fifth Avenue branch, without important clients, she had been forced to really see people, and she had learned that every client, regardless of how much they had in their account, deserved respect and attention. She wasn't completely changed yet. She still had her judgmental moments. But she was consciously trying to be better. Richard Barnes, the former manager, had been transferred to a branch in a small town. It was a clear punishment, but also an opportunity to start over. Far from the pressure and arrogance that Fifth Avenue brought, he was slowly reconnecting with the values that had made him join the bank many years earlier. The Fifth Avenue branch, under new management, implemented a training program in humanized service. All employees, from the janitor to the manager, went through workshops on empathy, respect, and equality. Michael's case, though never mentioned publicly, became a sort of internal legend. The story of the client who was humiliated and took millions away was told in training rooms as an example of what not to do. Samantha continued as a relationship manager, but now with a special focus. Identifying and protecting discreet clients like Robert had been. She knew there were many out there, people who had resources but didn't flaunt them, and made it her mission to ensure they were treated with the respect they deserved. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. 2 years had passed. Michael's workshop was thriving. He had been featured in Car and Driver magazine, which brought many new clients. His reputation grew, and he now had a 6-month waiting list for new projects. More importantly, he loved what he did. Every car he restored was a story, a memory brought back to life. And his clients weren't just wealthy people wanting expensive toys. They were enthusiasts, people who had an emotional connection to those vehicles. One of these clients was Sarah. She had shown up at the workshop 6 months earlier, bringing a Renault Dauphine 1968 that had belonged to her father, who had recently passed away. "He loved this car," she said that day, running her hand over the dusty body. "He drove it for 40 years, but in recent years it sat in the garage unable to run." "We can bring it back," Michael assured her. And they had. 3 months of careful work, restoring every part, recovering the original color, making the engine purr again. When Sarah saw the result, she cried, and in the process, she and Michael had grown closer. Conversations while she visited the workshop to check on the progress, coffees afterward, dinners eventually. It was natural, smooth, unhurried, and when Michael realized it, he was in love. Emily had also found someone. Daniel, a college classmate, also older, who had returned to studying after years working as a nursing technician. They connected, supported each other, and the relationship flourished. One Saturday afternoon, Michael and Emily were at home, their father's Caprice parked in the garage, when they decided to do something special. "Let's go to the old workshop," Michael suggested. "See how it's doing." They had rented the space to another mechanic, a young and hard-working guy who was just starting out. They charged a symbolic rent, just to help him get established. When they arrived, the workshop was operating. The young man, Tyler, was under a car working. "Hi, Tyler," Michael called. The young man came out from under the vehicle, wiping his hands on a rag. "Hey, Michael, Emily, what a surprise. We just came to see how everything is." "It's going well. I got 3 new clients this week, and that's great." "Your father would be proud." Emily smiled. They chatted a bit more, and when they left, Michael felt a deep peace. The workshop was still alive, still serving people, still a place of honest work. It was the best tribute they could pay to their father. 3 years after the day it all began, Michael married Sarah. It was a simple ceremony, at the house he and Emily had renovated. Only close friends and family. During his speech, Michael talked about his father, the lessons he learned, how that moment of humiliation at the agency had been paradoxically the start of something new. "My father taught me that a person's worth isn't in what they wear or how much they have in their account," he said, his voice choked. "It's in how they treat others, in their integrity, in their character, and I hope, every day, to be worthy of the lessons he left me." Emily, beside him with Daniel, cried with emotion. Samantha was present too. She and Michael had become friends over the years. She had been crucial not only in releasing the inheritance, but in teaching Michael how to manage that fortune wisely. "Your father chose well in trusting you," she said at one point. "You honored every dollar he left." Sarah integrated perfectly into the family. She had a small sewing atelier, something she did for the love of the art, not out of necessity. With Michael's workshop and her atelier, they had created a beautiful life, simple yet comfortable. One day, 4 years after the story began, Michael was at the workshop when he received an unexpected visit. It was Karen. She looked different, simpler, less makeup, casual clothes. She seemed younger, lighter. "Hi," she said timidly. "I don't know if you remember me." "I do." "Can I talk for a minute?" Michael invited her in. They sat in a waiting area he had set up. "I came to apologize," Karen began. "For real this time. Not just the empty words I said that day at the bank, but a genuine request for forgiveness for what I did." "It's in the past," said Michael, "but not for me. I've carried it all these years. The way I treated you, the prejudice, the arrogance. I have no excuse. I was cruel because I could be, because I thought I was above it all. And now I'm working at an NGO. I help people organize their finances, understand their banking rights, volunteer work. It's my way of trying to make up for what I did, not just with you, but with so many others I mistreated over the years." Michael studied her. She seemed sincere. "I accept your apology, Karen, and I admire your courage for coming here." "Thank you." Her eyes glistened with tears. "You have no idea how much this means." When she left, Michael thought about the power of forgiveness. It wasn't just for her, but for himself. Holding on to grudges, resentment, only poisoned the soul. Forgiving was freedom. Emily graduated with honors in nursing. She secured a position at a renowned hospital where she could finally apply everything she had learned. But more importantly, she was happy, fulfilled, making a difference in the lives of the people she cared for. She and Daniel got engaged, planning a wedding for the following year. The family that Robert had so loved and protected was thriving, not just financially but emotionally, spiritually. They were living the values he had passed on, honoring his legacy not with words but with actions. 5 years after it all began, Michael was driving the restored Caprice on a Sunday morning. Sarah beside him, her hand on his, on the gear shift. They were heading to the cemetery as they did every Sunday, to bring flowers, talk to his father, update him on their lives. When they arrived, Emily and Daniel were already there. The four gathered around the simple grave with the headstone that read only, Robert Peterson, father, husband, honest worker, 1945 and 2020. "Hi, Dad," Michael began as he always did. "I came to share the news." And he did. About the workshop, about new projects, about how life was going. Emily talked about the hospital, about the patients she had helped that week, about the wedding plans. Sarah, who had never met Robert personally but felt as if she knew him through the stories, spoke about how grateful she was to be part of that family. Daniel, always quieter, simply thanked Robert for raising such special children. As they were leaving, Michael looked back one more time. "Thank you, Dad, for everything, especially for teaching us that true wealth isn't in what we have, but in who we are." That night, back at home, Michael and Sarah sat in the backyard watching the stars. "You know what's funny?" said Sarah. "If that teller hadn't treated you poorly, if the manager had seen you on the first day, none of this would have happened the way it did." "How so?" "You wouldn't have felt the humiliation that made you value your father's lessons even more. You wouldn't have had that deep conversation with Samantha. Maybe you wouldn't have thought so much about what to do with the inheritance. Sometimes bad things happen to lead us where we need to be." Michael thought about that. She was right. That terrible experience at the agency had been a catalyst. It had confirmed the values his father tried to teach him. It had shown the importance of empathy and respect. "I'm glad I didn't let that make me bitter," he said, "because you're your father's son, and he taught you to be better than your circumstances." They stayed there until late, talking, dreaming, planning. The life they had built wasn't perfect, but it was meaningful. It was real. It was worthy. At the Fifth Avenue Bank branch, now under new management for several years, there was a plaque in the training room. It had no name, no photo, just a phrase. "Treat every client as you would want someone you love to be treated. Appearance doesn't define worth, character does." It was a constant reminder of that story that was never told publicly, but that changed the entire culture of that institution. Samantha, now a regional director, used the case in all her customer service lectures. Without naming names, without specific details, but always emphasizing, a moment of prejudice can cost not just money but dignity, respect, humanity. And whenever she told it, she ended by saying, "The person who was humiliated in that story chose to be better than those who humiliated him. He chose not to seek revenge, not to sue, not to expose. He just moved forward with dignity. That's true class. That's what we should all aspire to." Richard Barnes, at the small branch in the countryside, had become a very different manager. Humble, attentive, respectful to everyone. The experience of losing that account, of seeing his career almost collapse, had been the shock he needed. He often thought about that man he had turned away, and he promised himself he would never again judge anyone by their appearance. Karen, through her volunteer work, had helped hundreds of people understand their banking rights. In every person she helped, she saw a bit of Michael, a bit of that missed opportunity to be better. She would never be perfect, but she was trying. And trying, genuine effort was already much more than most people did. Robert Peterson's legacy wasn't just the money he left behind. It was the values, the lessons, the example of a life well lived. It was proof that it's possible to be successful without losing humility, that it's possible to have a lot without showing off, that true success is measured not by what you accumulate, but by what you leave behind. And what he left was extraordinary. 2 honest, hard-working, compassionate children, an inheritance that didn't corrupt but empowered, a story that inspired changes even if few knew about it. 6 years later, on a sunny morning, Sarah announced she was pregnant. Michael cried with emotion. It would be a boy. They already knew what they would call him. Robert, in honor of the grandfather he would never meet but whose legacy would live through him. Emily and Daniel had gotten married the previous year and were also expecting a baby, a girl whom they would name Olivia, in honor of Emily and Michael's mother, who had passed away years before their father. The family was growing. New beginnings, new lives, new stories. On the night of the announcement, Michael went alone to the cemetery. He knelt beside his father's grave and whispered, "Dad, I'm going to be a father. I wish so much you were here to meet your grandson. But I'll do the best I can. I'll teach him everything you taught me. About honesty, hard work, respect. About treating people well no matter who they are. About being rich in character, not just in money." The wind blew gently, swaying the trees around, and Michael felt somehow that his father was there, proud, giving his blessing. When little Robert was born 9 months later, Michael held that tiny being in his arms and made a silent promise. He would be the father his own father had been, present, dedicated, teaching by example. The shop continued to thrive. Michael had hired more employees, expanded the space, but he always kept the essence: quality work, respect for customers, fair prices. He had also started an internship program for youth from underprivileged communities. He taught them the trade, paid a decent wage, gave them opportunities. It was his way of giving back, of making a difference. Several of his former interns now had their own shops, and they all carried the values Michael had passed on, which he had learned from his father. It was a chain of kindness, of dignity, spreading. Emily, as a nurse, was loved by her patients. She had that gift of making people feel cared for, seen, respected. It was her mother's legacy in her, the endless compassion. And now, as a mother herself, she was passing it on to little Olivia, teaching her early about empathy, about caring for others, about being kind in a world that is often harsh. The two children, Robert and Olivia, grew up together, cousins, best friends, partners in adventure. And as they grew, they heard stories about the grandfather they had never met. Stories about the humble shop, about the hard work, about the simple wisdom of a man who never went to college but understood life better than many academics. "Was Grandpa a hero?" little Robert asked one day at 5 years old. "Yes, he was," Michael replied. "But not the kind that flies or has superpowers. He was a real hero, the kind that wakes up early every day and works honestly, who treats everyone with respect, who takes care of his family. Those are the real heroes. I want to be like him," the boy said seriously. Michael hugged him tight. "You will be. You already are." 10 years after that first day at the agency, Michael was in his shop when he got a call from the president of the Classic Car Restoration Guild. "Michael, I want to offer you a position. We'd like you to be our regional representative. Your work, your reputation, your values, you are exactly what we need." It was an honor, but also a responsibility. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but I hope you accept. You would make a big difference." Michael talked to Sarah, to Emily, even to little Robert. "Will you have to travel more?" the boy asked, worried. "A little." "Then don't accept. I'll miss you." Michael laughed, but it made him think. What would his father have done? Robert had always prioritized family above all else. He never let work come before his children. But this position was also an opportunity to make a bigger difference, to influence an entire industry, to spread the values he believed in. "You know what I'm going to do?" he said to Sarah. "I'll accept, but with conditions. Only necessary trips, never more than 3 days, and always letting you know beforehand. Family comes first." And that's how he accepted. And to his surprise, the guild agreed to all the conditions, because they recognized that a man who prioritizes his family is exactly the kind of leader they need. In the following years, Michael used his position to implement codes of ethics, training programs, social initiatives. He became a respected voice in the industry, always speaking about integrity, respect, social responsibility. And whenever he gave talks, He told the story of his father. Not the story of the bank, not the humiliation, but the story of the simple man who built a fortune through honest work and careful planning. "My father never made the front page of a newspaper," he would say. "He was never a celebrity, never famous, but he deeply impacted the lives of the people around him. He was a living example that it's possible to be successful without losing your soul. And that's the kind of success that truly matters." Emily, now a nursing coordinator at her hospital, had implemented a patient-centered care program. She trained nurses not only in medical techniques, but in empathy, in seeing the patient as a person, not as a number. "I learned that from my father," she explained. "He never had formal education in humanities, but he understood people better than many psychologists, because he genuinely cared. And that's what I try to pass on. Truly caring makes all the difference." The children grew up in an environment of love, solid values, and social awareness. Robert, at 12, already talked about wanting to follow in his father's and grandfather's footsteps, working with his hands, creating beautiful and useful things. Olivia, at 11, wanted to be a doctor. Not just any doctor, but the kind of doctor who really listens to patients, who cares. They were the next generation, carrying the legacy forward. 15 years after that first day, Michael was closing up the shop on a Saturday afternoon when his phone rang. "Michael, it's Samantha." He smiled. They still talked regularly, though not as often as before. "Hi, Samantha. How are you?" "I'm good. Look, I'm calling because I want to invite you to something. The bank is organizing an event. 20 years of the new management, the culture change, and we'd like you to be one of the speakers." Michael fell silent. "Talk about what?" "About your experience. About how that day changed not just your life, but the culture of the entire bank. It would be a chance to bring up a story that needs to be told." "I don't know, Samantha. I never wanted the spotlight, you know that." "I know, and I respect that. But think, how many people could benefit from hearing your story? How many institutions could learn? I'm not asking you to expose your life, just to share the lessons." Michael promised to think about it, and he thought a lot. He talked to Sarah, to Emily, even to his son. "Dad, if it can help other people not to be treated badly like you were, I think you should do it," said young Robert, with wisdom beyond his 12 years. And then Michael decided he would accept. Not for exposure, not for ego, but because maybe, just maybe, his story could make a difference. The event was held at a large hotel on Fifth Avenue. Hundreds of banking executives, managers, directors. Michael was nervous. He had never spoken to such a large audience before. When his turn came, he stepped onto the stage in his simple clothes, clean jeans, a dress shirt, the same brown leather jacket he wore 15 years earlier. "Good evening," he began. "My name is Michael Peterson, and 15 years ago, I was humiliated at this bank." The audience fell into absolute silence, and then he told it. The whole story, the loss of his father, the yellowed envelope, the attempt to get service, the way he was judged and dismissed, security removing him, Karen laughing at him. He didn't tell it with anger or resentment. He told it as fact, as experience, as a lesson. "I could have sued," he said. "I had legal grounds, discrimination, public embarrassment. My lawyers advised me to do it, but I didn't. Do you know why? Because my father taught me that revenge never builds anything, that the best use of adversity is to learn and grow from it." He told about Samantha, about how she helped him, about how the bank eventually changed. "But the issue isn't just about this bank," he continued. "It's about all of us, about how we treat people, about the judgments we make based on appearance, on prejudice, on arrogance." He spoke about his father's legacy, about the values, about how he used that inheritance not just for himself but to make a difference. "My father left me $3 million, he said, but the true value of the inheritance wasn't in the money. It was in the lessons, in teaching that character matters more than the bank account. That respect is owed to everyone, not just those who seem important. That true wealth lies in how we live, not in what we accumulate." When he finished, silence lingered for a few seconds. Then someone started to applaud, and another, until the entire audience was on their feet, clapping. Michael saw tears on many faces. He saw executives who had probably never been confronted with the impact of their actions. Afterward, dozens of people came to speak with him, to thank him, share their own stories, promise to do better. Karen was there. She had been invited too, an example of someone who changed after the incident. "Thank you," she said, her eyes red, "for giving me the chance to be better." "The chance always existed," Michael replied. "You just needed to choose to use it." In the following months, Michael's story spread, not in sensational headlines, but in professional circles, in corporate training, in business school classrooms. It became a case study about empathy, about prejudice, about how one moment can change everything. Michael didn't seek fame. He continued with his workshop, his simple life, his family. But when invited, he shared his story, always with the same goal, to make people think, to make a difference. 20 years after that first day, Michael was at home, now with graying hair, wrinkles around his eyes. Sarah was by his side, also older, but her eyes still shone with the same love. Robert, their son, now 22, was finishing a degree in mechanical engineering. He wanted to combine technical knowledge with the practical skills he had learned in the workshop. Olivia was in her medical residency, specializing in pediatrics, because she wanted to care for children, to give them the best possible start. Emily and Daniel had 2 more children. The house was always full, always noisy, always vibrant with life. That Sunday, as they always did, they all went together to the cemetery. 3 generations gathered around the grave of Robert Peterson. "Hi, Grandpa," said young Robert. "I finished my final project. It's about sustainable vehicle restoration. The professor said it's excellent. I think you'd be proud." "And I passed the hardest exam in my residency," Olivia added. "I saved a patient this week, a child who was very critical. It was the best feeling in the world." Michael and Emily looked at each other, smiling. The legacy continued. The values passed from generation to generation, not just in words, but in actions, in choices, in well-lived lives. "Dad," Michael said softly, "we did the best we could. I hope it was worth it. I hope you're proud." And somehow, in the gentle wind blowing, in the leaves dancing on the trees, in the peace of that moment, Michael felt the answer. Yes, it was worth it. Every sacrifice, every lesson, every moment. It was worth it because the legacy wasn't just money. It was love. It was character. It was the ability to make the right choices, even when it's hard. That evening, back at home, the whole family gathered for dinner. Michael looked around the table. Laughter, conversations, life, everything his father had dreamed for them. "A toast," he raised his glass, "to those who came before us and taught us the way, and to those who come after, who will carry the legacy forward." Everyone raised their glasses. "To Grandpa Robert," said the children. "To Dad," said Michael and Emily. "To the values that never die," said Sarah. And they toasted. To life, to love, to the legacy that truly matters. The story that began with humiliation in a bank branch had transformed into something much greater. A story about dignity, about respect, about how we choose to respond to adversity. Michael never set foot in that Fifth Avenue branch again, not out of anger, but because he didn't need to. He had found other institutions, other partners, other ways, but he knew that place, those people, had changed, and perhaps, to some small degree, his story had contributed to that. Years later, when Michael was 65, he decided to write everything down, not to publish, but to leave a record for his grandchildren so they would understand the family history, the origins of the comfortable life they had. He wrote about his father, about the workshop, about the secret investments, about that terrible day at the bank and everything that came after. And at the end he wrote, "The true measure of a person is not in how much they have, but in how they treat those who can do nothing for them. It is not in financial success, but in the integrity of their choices. It is not in avoiding adversity, but in how they respond to it. My father taught me this not with words, but with a lifetime of example. And I hope I have passed this on to my children, to those I've had the privilege to influence. If there is one lesson in this entire story, it is this: never let the judgment of others define who you are. Maintain your dignity, live your values, be kind even when the world is cruel, because in the end, the only thing that truly matters is the legacy we leave in the lives we touch. End of story. And now, tell me, what did you think of Michael's story? Have you ever been in a similar situation, being judged by your appearance? How did you react? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss other moving stories that bring valuable lessons about dignity, respect, and overcoming challenges.